Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting with Woodbury County Board of Adjustment. Today's date is August 5th, 2019, and the time is 6 p.m. Tonight's meeting will be audio taped and minutes will be prepared. In respect to all parties, we ask those present to turn off their cell phones or set to vibrate. Those in attendance are asked to legibly complete the attendance sheet up on the front table. I would like to take a moment to review the procedures that the board will follow tonight. First, the board will handle the normal housekeeping agenda items. Then for each application on the agenda, I will open the public hearing on the item. The planning and zoning staff will then present the staff report, including the staff recommendation. Any letters or other communication received from the public prior to the hearing will be entered into the record. The applicant will then have the opportunity to present his or her case and respond to the staff report. Next, we will hear comments from the public. If you would like to speak either in support of or against the application, you must come to the microphone. Please first state your name and address for the record. All interested parties shall be heard, but repetitious comments should be avoided. Repetitious or irrelevant comments may be ruled out of order by the chair. I ask that you remain respectful and courteous with your comments at all times. After all public comments have been heard, the staff and applicants may make a closing statement. The hearing shall then be closed by motion and vote. Thereafter, no further comments from the staff, public, or applicant may be heard unless asked for by the board. The board shall then deliberate the case and may ask questions of the applicant, the staff, or any party offering testimony. However, such questions do not reopen the hearing for additional comments from the public unless so requested or approved by the board. The board will then formulate and vote on a motion. The motion will typically either grant or deny the requested application. Any board member who has an ex parte communication to place in the record of this meeting should do so prior to the beginning of deliberation of the respective agenda item. Any person desiring to appeal the board's decision to a court of record may do so within 30 days after filing of this decision with the Planning and Zoning Office. All right, looking at our agenda, do we have any citizen wishing to be heard regarding a non-agenda item? Yes, not. Item number 2, approval of the minutes from our July 1st, 2019 meeting. Any comments, any motion?
Ken, did you find out was Mark?
Yes, I will introduce Mark's statement following the first agenda.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes from the July 1 meeting as presented.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. None me. Motion's passed. Okay. Did you want to say something before we get into this, or?
If it would be your determination if you'd like us to speak on the previous variance.
Let's go that direction before we do the variance request.
Okay,
For continuity.
we kind of had a change where Mark Nara was contacted. He reviewed the information. He initially said that he was going to stay with the same position. However, he then went on a site visit out at Ms. Benjamin's request, and he made a determination after looking at the site closer. He feels that we can allow 3 steps up to 6 feet wide to be constructed on the west side.
Oh.
So he is up for allowing that, and I do have his statement here to share with the board.
Good. Oh.
Allowed, she could be accommodated.
The thing that is though, that that should, that right of way be needed for ditch work or something like that, that will be removed, or need to be removed.
Yeah, Mark felt pretty confident just based on that amount, would not be an issue on that specific.
No four-lane highway going through there.
I'll be surprised if there's 10 people a day on that road.
Well, I appreciate you looking into it. I
Yeah.
appreciate Mark's going out, doing a site visit, reviewing
Yeah.
it. Like I said, he made such a strong recommendation last time that I felt that, burden should have been on him to allow it.
Had he visited the site previously?
He had looked at it from much of his own data there and the future plan of the road. And so he was looking at it on a numbers basis, but then when he went out there, he saw evidence where it would work.
So he had not been to the site previously?
He was, that I don't know in
Okay.
terms of before the first meeting. He usually just will put together the written recommendation, but I do know that the second time, because he clearly stated it
Right.
this time.
I think that's a good goal.
Well, I appreciate the extra effort, so.
Yeah.
One thing if I could,
Sure.
we would need a motion to amend the previous judgment, and just kind of for the record, the chair signed a previous resolution, number 407, which was based on the determination the board made last time about allowing it to go forward based on either going for the north or the south for access, but because of Mark's determination here tonight, the motion would probably consist of amending the previous motion to allow a new resolution basically to take its place.
How would you like to phrase that we'd recommend approval of the item that was brought before the board in, what month was it? July?
July 1st.
July. And it'd be amended to be in agreement with Mark's 7/31/2019 letter reviewing the situation on site. And this memorandum that Mark issued would be part of that.
Do we have a second?
Is
so
that,
we
was
can
that a
discuss?
motion? Is that a motion or a question?
That was a motion,
Okay.
kind of convoluted, but it was a motion.
Let's maybe.
Might I
Go ahead,
make a
please,
suggestion?
please.
I think maybe it would be imperative to have terminology in there from the legal aspect that it amends the previous action of the board. And like Dwight said, maybe mention the memo, but also directly state that the 3 steps up to 6 feet wide be constructed on the west side of the deck.
So, like, do we have a second with the friendly amendment?
How about we make a motion to amend the previous meeting's resolution
Resolution. yeah.
so that it allows the homeowner to build the steps as stated in Mark's letter.
I would even recommend amend and replace, because that was previous 407, this would be.
Okay, so amend it by replacing the prior language
Yeah.
and make the motion to amend the July 1 resolution to remove the prior language and insert the language as stated in Mark's letter.
Just, and then replace
That
it.
makes it however you want to
Well, I
do
don't know what we want, there isn't a saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fix it, Dan.
Dan and Dawn. So do we have a second to that motion, please?
I will second it.
Giving Dawn a chance. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same signal. None, motion has passed. It wasn't pretty, but it passed.
Well, they were notified of the first
Yes.
resolution, so you'll get in touch with them and let them know, because they probably started construction.
Absolutely. They were notified with the previous resolution and the building permit, so they still would have to file the building permit. But with this underway, the resolution now in place, they'll be able to file the building permit, which will indicate the steps on the west side.
They'll make their dimensions appropriate on that.
Okay, shall we open up the public hearing on the variance request? Norman Mahoney proposes to operate a residential solar panel 5 feet 4 inches by 11 feet 6 inches on his property located at 1738 Portland Boulevard, Sioux City, Iowa 51106. This property is located in the suburban residential zoning district and in the Morningside Heights subdivision on parcel number 8847947814 in Woodbury County Township 88, range 47, section 9. Staff.
Okay, for this public hearing, this was published in the Sioux City Journal Legal Sections on July 19th, 2009 for the hearing tonight. The 27 property owners within 500 feet were notified using a certified abstractor's listing. As of the printing of this packet, the office had received one inquiry from the Carriage Hill subdivision secretary who asked about how the panels would impact their energy bills. When more comments were received, which we have not received any since, we would have presented them here. The agency stakeholder comments, we basically had really no issues presented to us by the major stakeholders. Mid-American Energy did make a statement to direct the property owner to their department, their electric distribution engineering department, for information concerning hooking up to the grid. Going back to the facts of the case now, back in around, April, we initially received word from Lifetime Solar about this respective project. In July of last month, we had received the application materials for the conditional use permit, and we had learned that the item had been constructed already on the site as we were moving toward the zoning commission's review of this respective solar panel request. And kind of looking at the different levels of permitting, we had found that talking with Lifetime Solar that there is kind of some confusion in terms of this type of permitting. And our ordinance in particular, 3.034 of our table of land uses, does not directly enumerate this as being a conditional use within the zoning ordinance. However, due to the magnitude of what consists of a solar panel and it being comparative to wind energy for private use generation, we determined under 3.03.3 under administrator interpretation that it should come before the boards for review, just because of the magnitude, connecting to the utilities, etc. And as we were going through the review, we had found that historically there have not been a whole lot of these permitted in Woodbury County, and we had found that there had been one in the last 5 years or so that was administratively approved, and that could possibly be due to it not being enumerated in, just back to administrator interpretation. However, looking at this respective proposal, we contacted Sioux City, as this property is very close to the incorporated lines, and Sioux City's ordinance, basically, they go through the administrative review through their planning and zoning office under the criteria that was enumerated there in the packet. Based on looking at solar energy, one of the things that we look at in terms of the ordinance is getting into the general plan. Woodbury County is very friendly to the concept of getting into renewable energy, and also the ordinance itself has a positive statement there affirming solar energy. But yeah, we were again surprised that there wasn't some type of enumeration in the table of land uses. So we brought this to the board to ask for your direction and guidance on how to make a determination here. Looking at the neighborhood, we went out and saw that the structure was in place, and the county administrative policy is when something has been put into place without permits, the policy is, of course, to go back and review it as if it was going through the initial permitting process. But in addition, the building permit fee is doubled because of erecting a structure that has not been properly permitted by the county. And so based on that criteria, we went back and reviewed it and see that it meets the setback standards. The original site plan that was submitted to the county had the solar panels at a different location than what is presented here as within the plan in your packet. That is the exact location. They meet the zoning district dimensional standards. The county engineer reviewed it as well and sees that it meets the zoning district dimensional standards. The zoning commission, in their recommendation, looked at each of the criteria, and they voted separately on each of the criteria and found that they meet the standards for which to operate within Woodbury County. Therefore, they recommend the Board of Adjustment to approve the solar energy panels.
Is there someone that would like to come up and introduce themselves and talk about their application?
Good evening, we're James and Deanna Henning. We live at 7200 Christie Road. And yeah, I guess we have a couple of questions. It appears that it's mounted and connected at its permanent location. Question we would have is, given if this permit was granted, is there any possibility in the future that structure could be moved? And if so, where and how? And as it sits now, it's on the other side of the house. In other words, the Mahoney residence is in between the structure and our house at this time. It provides no disadvantage as far as cosmetic.
The aesthetic value right now doesn't bother you?
No,
Okay.
no. But like I said, our first question would be, given this permit to be granted, could it possibly be moved at any other location in the future? And if so, that may impact us.
I think they need to apply for a building permit to move it, to be treated as a new structure.
That is correct. The building permits are based much on the footprint and the site plan distances of where they are from the property line, and so any structure placed on a parcel would have to go back through a building permit review.
If that were to be at that time, could we have any objection to it at that time?
You would receive notice, and yes, you could certainly written, and again, you could come to the hearing.
But I won't say a gray area, I'm not clear on it, we'll say. Since solar panels are not part of the existing planning and zoning documentation as it is now, it needs to be inserted in that. And it's going to still be a conditional use permit, correct?
Well, again, that is something that the zoning commission did look at too, because when you're looking at 3.03.3 and 4, there is the room for interpretation. And the city of Sioux City doing it administratively at this time, the county in a sense has a conditional use permit as a higher standard. And so, the level of interpretation, the question is, does the conditional use permit directly look at that unit for that operation, or does it cover the whole parcel? So there's areas where we could parse.
And how does that decision be determined? I mean, is it, in the future, will it be conditional or administrative? That decision will be made by your office or the planning and zoning or the Board of Adjustments. When will that decision be made?
Well, reaching out to both zoning commission and board of adjustment for guidance, it kind of, it depends. If, you know, we set the precedent that it's conditional use, we would take it to conditional use so that everybody would have the same standard.
I think that's your answer, is if it's treated as a needed conditional use permit, you would be notified. If it's treated as an administrative permit, the application would go to the planning and zoning office, and they would either administratively deny or approve it. And in that case, you don't necessarily let nearby property owners know, do you?
Well, get another building permit.
A standard structured building permit, whether it be somebody putting a shed up or something, just comes under the premise of an administrative building permit that looks at setbacks.
And so you would notify?
Well, we would likely we would treat the next ones as conditional use permits based on this scenario here, unless the boards later on determine that, see, that's where we're seeking out guidance on how the boards feel about
Does
that.
that make sense to you?
You kind of lost me.
Yeah.
I'm suspecting, I'm kind of suspecting that given the two different options of what you talked about, that one of those options may be that we not be notified, given that they would decide to move it. Am I correct?
That would be accurate, I think, wouldn't it?
Do you have some reason to think that they are going to move it, or maybe move it?
It seemed, the location, the picture looks accurate, you know, but it's, to me, it seemed like it doesn't, like it might possibly not be the most efficient location, given the amount of sunlight that it receives. It receives a good amount of morning sun. And I know that in the past, they had solar panels on the top of their house
Oh,
in our direction, which had no visual disadvantage as far as we were concerned. We had no issues with that at all. Although this one is in a different position, and to me, not being an expert in solar at all, but I'm aware that it would be in the shade a fair amount of the day, and to me, it would seem like it would make more sense to put it on the other side of the house.
On your side of the house.
With full sun exposure to get more solar.
Right.
And if that's the case, the Mahoney's have a fence line 29 feet from our property line. If they have the permit and they have the option to move it where it's what's to prevent them from putting in, where the solar panels are facing our house 29 feet away.
So what direction is your house from their house? What direction is your house?
Yeah.
Towards Christie Road.
Almost straight south.
If your address is Christie Road, you must be.
We are closer to Christie. Yeah.
So you must be north then, wouldn't you? You turn off at Christie Road and go south to get to this property.
See, the directions out there are.
It's a little bit, not even with the world, but
roads run straight east and west. His house, his southern exposure is true south.
The panels as they
but aren't
sit
the
now,
panels
some
facing
trees-
south?
No, the house itself, where initially his original solar panels were on the top floor. It's a 2 or 3 story house that it sat up there. The panels at that time were facing true south. And the way it appears to me now, it's not quite that way, plus it's on the ground.
Their house is, this is facing south,
Yep.
so the solar panels are pretty much so facing south then.
Oh, I see. You're right.
Okay.
You're right. I was-
Okay. And your residence is down in this area someplace?
Yep, I would say right about there.
Okay, are either, any of these lot lines yours? And I'm not so sure those are
It's
lot
pretty hard
lines.
to see.
Yeah.
That's a pergola.
Yeah, that's kind of the,
But it's
Lattice, yeah.
open side,
okay,
about like that.
okay. The property's right
Did
down
they
there.
remove the
Okay.
existing solar panel?
So I can see easements are,
Yeah,
they're gonna
I'm
move
not
it.
sure.
Okay.
From there, I think.
I see.
So that's a good question.
But they do
If it's
face
conditional
south.
Use permit, then
I mean-
everybody be notified and it wouldn't happen until we had another one of these meetings. If it's an administratively issued permit, it's just gonna happen.
And I might say that the board can make a
I
condition
was just gonna say.
specific to this
Yeah.
case too.
How would you feel about that? If we made a condition that we'll grant this, that it stays where it's at. That won't change anything if they decide to build another one, then that'll fall on Mr. Priestley's office.
And if so, if they requested a permit to move it, we would be notified.
Well,
That's what we can say, when we address this and take a vote on it, we can add a condition that the residents at 7200 Christie Road need to be advised that they want, if they want to move.
No matter which option.
Right,
we were
correct.
previously talking
Correct,
about.
it would be flagged.
Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's just it with this existing solar array, if it's moved. Now, if they decide to add additional ones, where would that fall under?
Brand new structures would trigger new permitting procedure.
And that permitting process would include or not include?
Well, the conditional use for consistency, we would follow the same process.
Whereas,
You'd be notified like you were with this one.
I think even if they remove it or wants to move this panel, you should notify everybody that you did the first time, not just limit it to just you as a property owner.
You know, you call it conditional use to
They
relocate this.
they must stay in the same
Yeah.
location.
If they want to relocate this, they have to go through the conditional use process, and that would be all encompassing that, wouldn't it?
Again, it would be, looking at the movement could be a condition out of the board. If a new permit were to show up for another structure, then we would go the same process of starting a new permitting, conditional use permit.
If we were looking at approving this, we could place that condition on there where it would have to go through the conditional use process, which you'd get the same notification like you did now. But that wouldn't necessarily address a new structure.
Okay.
second question. Is there any possible future consequences, just not knowing the science on this solar input, going back into the power companies and going through the distribution lines? Is there any possible future negative consequence on neighboring property owners as far as cost, for energy cost?
I don't know that any of us are qualified to answer that.
I wonder if
I mean,
Yeah, we-
our neighbors have it and it certainly.
You before.
My name's Nate Campbell. I'm with Lifetime Solar, the company that put this solar array in. As far as your cost issues, as far as costs affecting neighboring houses, that's never been a case. There's been case studies done on it. The power company does not look at the general area and see, less electricity being used, so we're going to get one that's not. So you won't have any negative effects because of the solar array. Also, going back to your question about the moving the array, I will say I've been in solar for a little over a decade. Installation of electrical save on his electric bill because of not having as much shade would not outweigh the cost of what it would cost to move that array. So we put that array specifically there because we want to make sure it's aesthetically pleasing to everybody in the neighborhood, including the homeowner. Make sure it's going to get as much sun as possible in that condition. There's going to be some shading, I understand that. You know, worst case scenario, it'd be a lot cheaper to try to figure out how to take the tree down than to try to move it.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the time.
Thanks for coming up and raising your concern.
I think we have a question, thanks, very good, thanks.
And I do want to say, I'm here for any questions that you guys have. So,
The basketball hoop's not really in a good spot now, is
although the basketballs themselves shouldn't affect it as far as hitting them. I've had a couple of people, one customer that their kids were playing baseball and one kind of got broke because of baseball, but even that's pretty rare.
They have a, North Sioux City, I don't know if it's in Sioux City or if it's in Plymouth County. There's a fourplex up there that's got a solar array. Did you put that in?
No, we haven't. This is our first system up here, also went through the proper channels to this initially.
Then I saw a large solar array on Highway 20 coming back from the Cedar Rapids area, and I don't know if that's, I don't know who put that in, it's kind of unbelievable. Are we gonna see more of those?
I'm sure you will see more and more solar as time goes on. It's a growing industry, and even though this is kind of the northern edge of where it becomes more viable of a solution for electric bills, it's still, people are more than willing to do it because it does help offset the costs and help save the environment a little bit. So.
an RZR, that's an America application, not our.
I wonder that maybe some language be considered to put in planning and zoning regs and to address that. And there's nothing in there about wind either, is there? That's still coming, that's.
Yeah, it does address wind, but it does not address solar.
Yeah, the private use wind generators, even the real basic ones like you buy at Home Depot, would be subject to a conditional use.
But if somebody comes in like Mid-American again, and whoever wants to put a wind farm in,
Turbines.
and the county have the turbines, and I guess I don't think our regs
There's not a large
deal with
state.
that, and maybe they should address it. Because you hear people that complain about the noise and the issues and so forth. There should probably be some thought to upgrading planning and zoning regs for both. Golly, I don't know what else we would have for electrical or power generator coming at us. You never know. I read an article about, instead of these big turbines, you've got some that are vertical that, and it's coming, whether you like it or not.
So with the solar array, you realize now that a building permit has to be applied for.
Yes, yeah. So
It's still be double, right?
we do solar arrays across a wide range of states, and every county, every state, every city is a little bit different. And so anytime that we have come across one where we hit a snag because we weren't aware of the proper procedure to go through, we make note of that so we don't have the same issue.
Probably a good idea to ask the county board or whatever, you know.
And so we have adjusted how we do our checks on what all is required.
Yeah.
So, and
Good idea.
yeah, this is one of those where we're adjusting some of
request by Mid-American Energy, has that been addressed? Is that-
Apparently, from what I've seen, that contact was made through a different contact at Mid-America, not the one that was stated in the.
For Alex?
We do have an engineering application that we have sent them, and so it has been sent, they're aware.
Good.
And it's-
If, not to get off the subject, but that's required that they allow that currently, isn't it?
Yes.
So, okay. So that's just a process.
Board have any other questions of anyone?
I could ask you questions all day long.
I'm in no hurry, so.
I'd like to say everybody else's time, but as it pertains to this, like you say, other than it wasn't permitted properly the first time, typically, that's the only concern I think we would have. Make a motion to close the hearing?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor to close the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor, same signal. The public input for the hearing is closed. Thank you. Does the board have any discussion or have a motion?
The planning and zoning offices, their opinion is that it would normally have been pretty well straightforward, and everything fell within the right cookie cutter.
Yeah, in terms of one of the first things we look at is the zoning district dimensional standards, and I went out and measured and looked with a wheel, especially when it was erected without being permitted. That raised the alarm, and so looked at that, and I was confident within the suburban residential district that it met the placement criteria for the building permit.
I don't have any questions. I think, like you said, it looks as good as it could look for what it is.
And do we want to include the consideration to notify the residents within the same?
Should
I
we
think-
change or read
I think
over
maybe we
it?
should
Yes.
just approve it at that location.
Oh, where the footprint for the solar
Where
panels are.
it's currently at.
As it's been constructed.
And it would be obvious then if they were gonna move it, it would start the whole cycle. That would be, I think would be a good way to word it.
Seem clean cut enough for everybody? So, the motion is.
Okay, I will make a motion that we approve the application in its current location with no provisions for it being moved. That cover it?
Could I add to it, if it was to be moved, that would have to go through the conditional use process again?
You accept the footprint?
I think that's obvious to me.
Okay, yeah. Then I'd second that motion.
That used to be a reset on the permits.
Prove it in its current footprint, or how, I'm not trying to replace the words now. Do we have a second by Bob, is that right?
Right.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same signal, none being. Motion's passed. Okay, Kathy.
I'd like a little conversation about adding it to there's a lot of things, that, like, a lot of questions I have about it too, when you get into subdivisions and there's small acreages and stuff like that. Glare, I don't know if they, that much about it, it could be a problem, but somebody needs to develop some language or get it from somebody, develop some language to include it in the planning and zoning regulations and provide a little more clarity. It's, the owners there had, adjacent owners had some concerns, should it be moved, and I guess I don't blame them. They're not exactly a pretty thing to see,
No.
but they're gonna come, and we've got to be ready for it.
Well, Dan indicated, I asked him about it, the setback in the subdivision is only 3 feet.
Yeah, there's, looking at our table, within that zoning district, that's suburban residential. It's geared towards the parcels that are right near a city boundary. And so with the suburban residential, that would be construed as an accessory structure to the dwelling. So they would have 3 feet side yard setback, so it'd be 3 feet from the
It's very
property line.
close,
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of impact, you know, can somebody put a shrubs in or plantings and,
I'd recommend that any
Right.
future applications do go through the conditional use permit process.
And I'll continue talking with Sioux City as well. I had a little short conversation with city planner over there, and they mentioned that they approved some of those.
Now, if they were to be put on top of the existing structure, permit wouldn't be needed, correct?
On the existing
If,
structure?
like he had before on his house apparently, if
Oh.
he was to put him on his house, he wouldn't need a permit for that, would he?
Well, it is possible depending on the respective determination, because if we look at the word structure in terms of building permit, and so it could be construed as anything constructed, erected, or placed on a fixed location on the ground or on another structure.
Okay, so that's covered on that then.
you never know.
But do people do that?
There have been times where something has been added. I'll give a classic example is the telecommunications industry. They're updating a lot of the different towers going on, and they come in for building permits to attach the new antenna structures onto the existing antennas.
Wording wise, to get a satellite dish put on your house, you need a permit then.
Really?
Well,
What-
in
You're gonna
He-
get
he's-
by the
terms
strict
of-
interpretation.
Wow.
terms of interpretation, there
But
is.
it's kind of like driving,
Liberal interpretation.
it's kind of like driving 59 in a 55 speed limit too, though. There's probably allowable offenses in there, I'm sure.
I've seen some satellite dishes though that are they're not like these little ones.
Well, they
I've seen
used to be
some that
huge.
are really big.
30 years ago, I had one of the 10-foot dishes.
They still make them too, I
I
think.
don't know, it was a wind vane for a long time, it just sat in the yard. But that's, you know, like I said, it's going back quite a while ago.
Primitive days.
Primitive days, back in the old days before cell phones.
Do you have any
Or
other
townhouse.
board comments or questions, or Dan,
I-
you have something, okay?
I do have some material to present, and you're all welcome to hang along. Last month, we had mentioned the floodplain
Right.
development ordinance. I just want to update you. We had addressed this with the zoning commission as well, and what it is the DNR has a draft proposal, and I spoke with Bill Cappuccio of the DNR, the NFIB coordinator, and he has mentioned that since 2008, they've updated kind of systematically. They'll add a definition or kind of change the layout of the ordinance, and they gave me a copy of the draft language, which I'll distribute here tonight. Do I have enough?
Or reading.
Found it here, but did you, do we have another one?
Do you have two?
Or did I get
file?
two? I got one, staple.
Okay.
I have to come down and get a
you a copy.
resolution, sign a
I'll
resolution.
get you a copy.
Well, this is pretty thick.
Yeah.
I'm gonna clarify that.
Here.
You're gonna read this
I'll
tonight,
get it
right
to
now?
Tom, 'cause I'll be down in the office to sign the resolution.
Basically, to describe this, it's not as intimidating as it looks in terms of the size. Basically, the zoning commission is the board that would oversee any type of ordinance change. And so it would go through them, public hearings through them, and it would ultimately go to the board of supervisors. They are kind of thinking through a little bit right now when they might want to take that up, but we will definitely let you know when some of the planning sessions are. Maybe it could be as late as later in the year. But what I want to point out about this is this does not completely replace what we have on the books. It highlights a few areas in there and reorders it. And it simply kind of follows Iowa code more, where they put the definitions up front of what consists of a floodplain development ordinance. They clarify the accessory structure language, where they're trying to make it a little bit easier on property owners in terms of approving a accessory structure, not having it go through the conditional use permit, but it would still be required to go through elevation standards and have a elevation certificate where surveyors will certify that a structure has been built 1 foot above the base flood elevation level. So the big change in there is to remove a conditional use permit.
Oh.
However, the DNR would still be involved with the county in terms of getting the base flood elevation. I have this little PowerPoint. I'm not going to go through a whole PowerPoint tonight, but just to kind of show you, our existing ordinance goes through this kind of order here, and this is simply a revised order. So if you think about taking the ordinance in the book and just shifting some categories around, that's really what they do on the surface. They add some definitions for clarity, and they remove the conditional use, are kind of some of the key summaries. But the highlighted regions on there are what the DNR pointed out as the areas within the ordinance that could be changed. They
Could
also
be or
have,
should be.
what's that?
Could be or should be.
Well, it's the determination of the county. We do have the boards and the public hearings, et cetera. And so Bill Cappuccio offers language in there where we can, for example, higher our standards in terms of elevating, which could be quite controversial. The base flood elevation is 1 foot to protect facilities, homes, etc. Well, when folks think of 1 foot, it may not just be 1 foot of what's existing. The base flood elevation level could maybe be 2 or 3 foot, depending on what the level is. But there's some counties, very few though, that have said you need to build 2 feet above the standard, which could be quite costly when you bring fill in, etc. But what we're looking at is the NFIP program in general. We're trying to assess where the county has been in the past to kind of go toward the future. If we are to kind of address some of these kind of safety issues with the floodplain, et cetera, and get into the NFIP, they have a specific program, the CRS program, and as we look at elevation certificates and present FEMA with kind of a plan, we can actually look at getting lowered insurance rates for people who are in the floodplain. Maybe 5% here, and as these type of things are addressed more, there's potential to move up in terms of making the floodplain safer for people, as well as using the ordinance, just using the ordinance standards in general to elevate. And again, elevation can be quite a controversial thing because of the amount of cost. The more you make something safe or elevated, it goes up in cost.
But am I misunderstanding? It sounds like you're softening some of the elevation standards?
The logistics, the conditional use would be removed in place of being administratively approved. However, they would have to be
Looking at each one individually.
Yeah, and so they would basically, they have to retain the policies of the ordinance, and that is
I see.
floodproofing. If you're in a zone A floodplain, what happens is they automatically have to get a floodplain development permit. Right now, you have to get a conditional use permit. They contact the DNR with a BFE. You might recall we did one last year.
Yes.
And they would get that BFE, prove that they're elevating to that level, offer a elevation certificate to seal it off that the structure is in that position now. And so what they're trying to do is just remove that one layer from the property owners, but yet the standard is still there.
Okay.
That they have to elevate, and this really pertains to accessory structure. When you're in that zone A and you look at either structure or development, you could have something like a shed or something that you think, why do I have to go through this? And go through the conditional use permit process. And so what the DNR has done is they're trying to make it a bit easier on farmers and others with the accessory structure. Because farmers do have the egg exemption, but the egg exemption does not apply to floodplain development. And so that's just one of the considerations.
personal issue that I've dealt with on this, and I don't know if you have the ear. I've talked to Bill about it a number of times myself years ago, when this was all happening. But we have a property on the lake, down around the lake, and the resident structure, lowest level of all is above, 1 foot above, more than 1 foot above the floodplain, 1%. But some of that property is on the bank of the lake. There's a 20-foot elevation through the whole property into it. So even though the home was up here, down by the lake was in the floodplain, so the whole property is in the floodplain. And that's a problem. That cost us quite a bit of money to file the loan,
Yeah.
go through that whole process. But we had to do it. The neighbor had to do it. The neighbor had to do it. 16 houses all the way up the lake had to do it. It was about $1,400 each. And it did nothing other than change the legal document.
And that's
A lot of money was spent.
And that's an interesting point, because when somebody shows up and they want to put in, let's say, a significant garage or structure, they basically run into a fork of two options. Go get the BFE from the DNR for the parcel, figure out what it's going to take to put the site plan together, file a building permit, file a floodplain development permit, and file a conditional use permit. So you have the multiple permits there.
The existing property, this was on a house that was built in the 60s.
Mhm. And
all of a
so,
sudden, now it's in the floodplain, you have to have, flood insurance is at 1%, so you take a $200,000 home, it's $2,000 a year for flood insurance.
and
It's never flooded back in 52, it never flooded.
and
So,
kind of going the conditional use permit route and the typical elevation route, what happens is you're still obviously subject to the flood insurance. So the second route is, you had mentioned the expense of getting a surveyor. If you go for a letter of map amendment, the letter of map amendment will remove the parcel from the floodplain after they can certify that the elevation is higher than the base flood elevation.
but you need a survey to do that.
And you do need a surveyor.
So, it costs you $200,000.
A lot of that stuff is all put in by,
I'm sorry, just a second to interrupt you. We're gonna leave now, and I just want to thank you.
Oh, sure. Thanks for stating your concerns.
Legitimately.
Thanks for coming in. Thank you too.
And
I think there's, with the original establishment, I think I mentioned last time, that is photogrammetry is how they determine where their floodplains are. They're not, it's not a hard survey, and I don't know if they're using LiDAR or not now, and I don't know how accurate that is.
It's not.
It's, well, it's good for snow, and I was worried about snow intrusion and stuff like that. It's like a couple of feet, when you're dealing with flood, a couple of feet can make a hell of a difference. And
Especially
we had some people out in the neighborhood where I live that was in the 100-year flood on Prairie Creek. They had some hard survey come in, and they wouldn't even close their property. And it's a shame that our technology, I think if technology is improving, that maybe we don't do a better job of finding out just what the floodplain is. On the other side of that coin, what happened to the Missouri this year and happened a couple of years ago, surprise, surprise, and that's not gonna go away.
Right, no, right.
kind of what happens, Bob is mentioning, is by virtue of simply building in the floodplain, it triggers the permits. If you're expanding on a structure, it triggers the permits. Now, an issue with the LOMA is there's two different types. You can get a LOMA for the entire parcel, or you can get a structure-based LOMA. And I've had an individual get a structure-based LOMA, so
Based on
now
hard survey.
they want to add on to that structure, they have to go start over in terms of proving out that LOMA. And so,
You can determine the dimensions of what you want removed. Because I think you guys were all here on this when Copperson wanted to move that house.
Yes.
And he didn't give himself enough room to be removed from the floodplain, and we wouldn't allow him to build on the part that he had
Right, that's
removed.
still,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, not a popular thing.
But floodplains are, flood insurance, that's the biggest deal, isn't it? And if you have a loan on the property, you have to have flood insurance if you're in the flood. If you own it, free and clear.
But, you know, we have it free and clear, but if you want to sell
If you want to sell
it, then the potential buyer has to come up with that much more money into their escrow.
Will there be public meetings?
Yes, absolutely. If this were to be taken up by the zoning commission, it would set a series of meetings that would highly involve the public. And my understanding is when it went on in 2011, it was quite an active event as well.
So you're gonna let us know when the meeting will be?
Yeah, and we're gonna have to kind of follow the lead of what the zoning commission comes about, and I imagine
I
when
wouldn't
they
mind
schedule.
attending that, just to, we wouldn't be included in the meeting, it's just planning and zoning commission.
Well,
They can come, and I can't.
The board itself doesn't have the ordinance authority, however, you'd be welcome to be involved in those meetings.
I'd like to follow it.
Do you have anything else, Dan, that you want to?
I was just trying to catch that conditional use section.
Gotcha.
Basically, the highlighted regions, if I can just find it's pretty much the same other than this one specific area. I'm gonna just search that out.
Yeah. Ask for, do what they do in Florida, put up an island.
Okay, basically where we have where it says floodplain overlay district. The current language here includes the permitted uses, the structures, agricultural uses, industrial uses. Let's see. The current language has conditional uses, so uses are structures, accessory to open spaces. So this would include the placement of structures, temporary or permanent. So pretty much any type of structure meets the structure definition would go zoning commission, board of adjustment. And so the proposed language is the DNR is
Just
proposed to
removing
remove this. And when I asked Bill how many counties, he said several, but he wasn't able to give me that raw number. But he had mentioned that since 2008, that little incremental changes to ordinances have happened statewide. And what I mean by that is, and I could present this in great detail later on, but this definition here was not highlighted. It's not part of our ordinance. But what I did is I combed through and compared our ordinance to that packet. And I saw that was a definition that slipped through because it wasn't added between 2008 and 2019. But however, we've caught most of that, but there's just a few definitions that are not part of our ordinance that would be nice to be brought in to help kind of clarify.
Well, since you're speaking the same language, then through
Yeah, and
the
so,
permit process.
so that conditional use permit section that I showed you was the biggest
Yeah.
removal there, but yeah, and so we can definitely talk about it further, and I'll definitely get the information out to you, and I owe you another packet.
Please,
so-
when I come down, sign something.
One more quick thing, Frank,
Sure.
before we're done with that. I got approached today by a delegate from somebody that wants to take, apparently they talked to your office already on 0141, Carrie Yaniff. Okay, their delegate talked to me, and I told them that they need to go through this conditional use process, but she came up here to do that, and she thought that she was kind of a rubber stamp, now that ain't gonna happen. Well, I told him to tell her to make sure that she goes through that process to do that. Basically, it comes to, she has a piece of property along 141, and there's a small structure on it already, and it's right up against the hill of the back property. Well, the current requirements are that primary structure has to be behind it.
Oh,
Well, it's not physically possible to do that.
Yeah,
So,
I've read across that before.
yeah, and I told him that we've had that a number of times in the
Yeah.
past, and it's typically, if there's no other options, it's typically, looked favorably on.
Right.
And I didn't want to give her any indication that it was going to be approved or anything
Right.
like that, but I told Randy to tell her just to go through that process. And it's kind of a timely fashion thing for her, because they're trying to get another building. You'll find out all of it over and above what you already know, but most likely that'll be on next month's
everything on the west side of 141 is net.
It's straight
Almost
down,
an
everything
average.
on the east side is straight
So
up.
it's speaking of next month,
East side.
if we have it, it's scheduled to be Labor Day, so we'll have to.
Do the following Monday probably, or,
Yeah, it's the choice of the board. It is very likely we're gonna get a request.
Well, the courthouse will be locked.
Yeah, well, Labor Day it won't work, so.
I can't make it that day.
Yeah, Labor Day's not on.
So,
Yeah, I
So if
kind
it's-
of had a schedule conflict on the second Monday.
Any day works.
But yeah, it's up for whatever works for everybody.
Just decide by email once we know that something's on the schedule, and I'll know for sure whether I have that conflict. That's pretty much it.
Would the week be kind of a safe date? The reason I would kind of recommend we establish a hard date is because when somebody comes in, we've got to do the notifications to the
Yeah.
public and always be very clear to the applicant when it can go before
So
the.
you think we're gonna have a meeting next month?
It's very likely.
Why don't we set the date?
Would Tuesday, the 3rd work for anybody? Or not work for
I'm
anybody?
not sure.
I have no problem with any date.
Wednesday, that's a good day or not?
Wednesday's better for you, Joanne, is that what you
I
said?
don't have a job anymore.
Yeah.
You're
Tom,
retired too?
what about the 4th, Wednesday the 4th, are Wednesdays okay for you, Tom?
September 4th.
So we'll set it for the 4th,
The Wednesday after Labor Day.
yes.
Next meeting, September 4th, for sure, right?
Well, we'll get
It's a
notified.
big maybe, so.
But if we do have it, it will be the 4th, Wednesday the 4th.
Yeah. Yeah, we just need to be able to tell applicants with confidence that's when they would have their date.
Appreciate you not putting it in the mailbox. The dog loves to know you're right. We gonna adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Please, sorry, I was messing with my calendar.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second.